Hey everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today's story is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about life and death. It's about a man who went through a near-death experience that completely transformed his view of reality. After nearly dying, he found himself surrounded by a golden light and encountered a being that showed him the true meaning of love and existence. In this video, he'll share the incredible details of what he saw on the other side, how it changed his life forever, and the powerful lessons he learned along the way. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more eye-opening stories like this one. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with anyone who's searching for answers. Let's dive into it. Hey there, I'm Gavin Ashford. I'm 45 and I live in Savannah, Georgia with my wife, Elena. I work as a project manager for a construction company, and I've always led a pretty normal life. Well, that was until everything changed. I've never really been into the supernatural or spiritual stuff. I'm more of a practical guy with my feet on the ground. My day-to-day routine was pretty average. I woke up early, went to work, came home, had dinner with Elena, and sometimes went out with friends on the weekends. Nothing too crazy. Since I was a kid, I've had a complicated relationship with my body. I played sports, but I often felt drained after practice. I'd get this pressure in my chest that annoyed me, but the doctors always told me I was fine, that it was just stress. Over time, I learned to brush off those feelings, thinking it was normal. After all, who doesn't feel a bit off sometimes, right? But that laid-back attitude nearly cost me my life, and also led me to an experience that turned my world upside down. I'm here to talk about the day I almost died and how that experience changed me into a different person. I'm not some spiritual leader or a best-selling author. I'm just an everyday guy who went through something out of the ordinary and feels the need to share my story. Maybe it'll resonate with someone out there or help someone see life in a new light. I don't know, but I just can't keep this to myself. So if you're open to it, I'd love to share the story of the day my life almost ended, which is when it really began. It's a tale about life, death, and everything in between. It's about discovering things beyond what we see and experiencing something bigger than our ordinary lives. It's a story of transformation. I'll go into detail about what led up to that pivotal moment and how my life changed after. I don't expect you to believe everything I'm about to say. Honestly, if someone had told me something like this a few years back, I would have been skeptical. But I just ask that you listen with an open mind. Sometimes, the most amazing things in life are the ones that challenge how we usually see the world. So, if you're ready, let's dive in. Let's kick off this journey together, one that took me beyond the ordinary and changed everything for me. It was Christmas Eve in 2015, and the air was chilly and damp, pretty typical for Savannah this time of year. Since I had the day off, I decided to finally tackle a job I had been putting off for months, uprooting the massive tree in the backyard. Its roots were starting to mess with the house's foundation, and I knew I had to get on it before it became a bigger problem. I got up early that day, grabbed a quick cup of coffee, and headed outside. I didn't even take the time to warm up or get ready properly. After all, I was just cutting roots, right? Nothing too tough. I grabbed my hoe and started digging. Time flew by as I kept on working, digging and chopping. Even though it was cold, sweat was running down my face. At one point, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the kind that doctors always brush off as stress. I pushed it aside like I always did. I just need to rest, I thought, but I didn't stop. I was determined to finish before Christmas dinner. The pain in my chest got stronger as the day went on, but I was stubborn and didn't want to admit anything was wrong. After all those checkups over the years, the doctors always said I was fine. So I kept going, pushing my body. By the time I wrapped up the work, it was getting dark. I stumbled into the house, wiped out, but feeling good about getting it done. I jumped in the shower, got dressed for dinner, and joined my wife, Elena, at the table. That's when things started to go downhill. The ache in my chest, which I had been ignoring, came back with a vengeance. It felt like someone was squeezing my chest in a vice. I tried to hide it. I didn't want to freak Elena out on Christmas Eve, but she could see right through me. "Gavin, are you okay?" she asked, noticing I was out of sorts. I forced a smile. wanting to say I was fine, but the words barely made it out with the pain gnawing at me. Elena, ever the attentive one, pushed for us to head to the hospital. I resisted, of course. Who wants to go to the ER on Christmas Eve? But she stood her ground. "Better safe than sorry," she said. Deep down, I knew she was right, so off we went, driving through the festively decorated streets of Savannah toward the emergency room, the pain only getting worse. It got worse every minute when we hit the hospital. I could hardly catch my breath. The doctors were quick to see me and ran an ECG, but to my annoyance, nothing significant came up. Still, the doctor on call, Dr. Lillian Moore, decided to keep me in for observation. I was bored out of my mind and just wanted to go home and finish my Christmas dinner. But deep down, I sensed that night was going to be different, and it really was. That night changed everything. It was the night I almost died, and in a strange way, it's when I truly started to live. I was lying on the hospital gurney, staring at the bland white ceiling when it all kicked off. Suddenly, the pain in my chest lifted. It felt like a giant weight had just been taken off me. Then, what happened next is tough to put into words. In a split second, my surroundings vanished. The white ceiling, the hospital walls, the beeping machines, everything disappeared. Instead, I was wrapped in this golden light that was warm and inviting, like I was floating in a never-ending sea of golden clouds. It was a feeling I can't describe, a peace I had never known before, a happiness that words can't capture. All the burdens of life, the worries, fears, and anxieties, gone. I felt so light, so free. Then it hit me. I was no longer in my body. There was no pain, no physical limits. It was like I was pure consciousness, pure energy. The person I used to be, my earthly identity, my ego, seemed to fade away. That's when I noticed something approaching. Or maybe someone. It was a being of light. It's hard to say what it looked like. It was like it was made of pure light and energy. But the presence of this being, oh my God, was beyond anything I can explain. It radiated such pure, unconditional love that I felt accepted and cherished in a way I had never experienced before. This being didn't communicate with words like we do. Instead, it felt like messages were being sent directly to my soul, touching my very essence. What it revealed to me changed everything I thought I knew about life, the universe, and our existence. It showed me that we as humans are trapped in an invisible system, a system meant to keep us in a constant state of fear, anxiety, and misery. According to this being, this system is run by forces that thrive on our suffering, blocking our true potential. At first, I was stunned by what I had just learned, but at the same time, something inside me clicked with this truth. All those frustrations and pointless struggles I'd been dealing with suddenly felt clear. It was like I was seeing life through fresh eyes, as if a curtain had been pulled back. But the being of light didn't stop there. He shared something even more shocking with me. We all have the ability to draw in prosperity, joy, and fulfillment into our lives. This ability, he said, is always there for us, but it gets hidden by the distractions of our everyday lives. He explained that there's a universal energy field where all our dreams already exist, and we can tap into this field to bring our desires to life through some simple but powerful steps. Knowing what we want, visualizing it strongly, feeling thankful ahead of time, and clearing away mental barriers. He went into detail about each of these steps, and I was completely captivated by what he was saying. Every single word resonated with me in a way I'd never felt before. It was like I was remembering a truth I'd always known but had somehow forgotten. Then, all of a sudden, everything started to fade. The golden clouds, the being of light, that feeling of total peace, it all began to vanish. I started to hear voices calling me, voices from the real world. That brought up a wave of frustration. I really didn't want to leave that place of love and calm. I wanted to stay there forever. But I didn't have a choice. I felt myself being pulled back into my body, back to the hospital, and back to the familiar reality I knew. When I opened my eyes, I saw concerned faces of the doctors and nurses around me. The pain in my chest had disappeared, but I felt a new sense of restlessness settle in. I knew deep down that what I'd gone through wasn't just a dream or a figment of my imagination. It was real, more real than anything I had ever felt. I knew, right then and there, that my life would never be the same. Coming back to reality after an experience like that isn't easy. It's like waking up from an incredibly vivid dream, only a million times stronger. As I opened my eyes to see the stark white ceiling of the hospital, I felt a confusing mix of relief and frustration. I was relieved to be alive, to have made it through whatever I had just experienced, but frustrated at being yanked away from that deep peace and understanding. The doctors and nurses around me seemed relieved too. Apparently I had blacked out for a few minutes, and they had feared the worst. They kept doing tests and checking things out, but they didn't find anything physically wrong with me. I was in great shape, but I could feel that something had shifted inside me. While I was still in the hospital, I started noticing little changes in how I acted and how I saw the world. The first thing that hit me was this amazing sense of calm and peace I had never felt before. The little worries that used to bug me just didn't seem to matter anymore. I caught myself smiling for no reason, feeling truly grateful for simple things like the sunrise coming through the hospital window or a nurse's warm smile. Speaking of nurses, my interactions with the hospital staff took a complete turn. Before, I might have been frustrated and impatient to get out of there, but now I found myself engaging with the nurses, really listening to their stories, and feeling a connection with everyone who came into my room. I particularly remember a nurse named Sarah. She looked like she was having a tough day when she came in to check my vitals. I asked her how she was doing, and at first she gave the usual, "I'm fine." But there was something about my tone that seemed to open her up. She told me about the struggles she was having at home caring for her sick mother while juggling work and family. Before this experience, I probably would have just nodded and changed the topic, but now I really absorbed what she was saying. I could feel her pain and struggle, and out of nowhere came this heartfelt urge to comfort her. I don't exactly remember what I said, but I know I talked about how strong she was and how her love truly mattered. I saw her eyes welling up with tears, and she thanked me for really listening. This kind of connection happened several times during my stay. It felt like I could see beyond the surface and feel what others were going through, and more than that, I felt this deep love for everyone I met, this real desire to help ease the suffering of others. My wife Elena was the first one to notice I had changed. She visited me every day, and each time she commented on how different I seemed. "Your eyes are different, Gavin," she would say. "There's a light in them that I've never seen before." At first I hesitated to share my experience. I was worried she'd think I'd lost it, but as the days went on, I felt it was time to open up. One afternoon, when we were alone in that hospital room, I took a deep breath and started to count. I talked about the golden light, about this being of light, and about the truths that had come to me. I shared my thoughts on the invisible system that keeps us trapped and how we have the power to create what we want in our lives. While I spoke, I made sure to watch Elena's face closely, worried that I might see doubt or concern there. But to my surprise, she listened with such attention and openness that it really moved me. When I finished, she held my hand and said, "I don't get everything you're saying, Gavin, but I can see that you've changed. Whatever happened, it's transformed you in a wonderful way." Her words hit me like a wave. Knowing she was there for me and accepted this new side of me gave me the courage I needed for what was ahead. I realized that going back to the everyday world after everything I experienced wouldn't be easy. Finally, after a week in the hospital, I was discharged. The doctors didn't find anything wrong and said the episode was just due to extreme stress, advising me to take it easy for a bit. Little did they know, taking it easy was the last thing on my mind, because now I had a mission to bring what I learned from my near-death experience into my life. Coming home after a week in the hospital felt surreal. Everything looked the same, but it also felt completely different. The house was as I left it, the furniture in the same spots, but my view of it all had shifted dramatically. In the first few days, I was bursting with enthusiasm and determination. I couldn't wait to put into practice everything I had learned from that experience. Each morning, I woke up early, sat in the backyard, and tried to visualize the life I wanted to create. I closed my eyes and imagined living a life full of abundance, peace, and fulfillment. I pictured myself free from money worries, doing work I genuinely loved, and surrounded by supportive people. I aimed to feel gratitude as if it was all already happening. At first, this practice filled me with energy and hope. I started each day feeling like I could take on anything. But as the weeks passed, I found myself getting more and more frustrated. No matter how hard I tried, everyday life seemed to be pulling me back into my old habits. The bills kept piling up, and my job remained. One particularly tough day, about a month after I got back home, everything seemed to pile up on me. I had just gotten an unexpected bill. My car broke down, and my boss was breathing down my neck about a project that was due soon. I slumped on the couch, feeling completely overwhelmed, and began to wonder if any of it was real or if I was just imagining everything. I started to doubt myself deeply, thinking maybe the doctors were right, that it all might have been a stress-induced hallucination. Elena noticed I was feeling down. She came and sat beside me, asking what was up. I opened up to her, spilling out my frustrations about how hard it was to apply everything I had experienced in the real world. She listened carefully and then said something that really stuck with me. "Gavin, you've gone through something incredible, but don't expect change to happen overnight. It's a process. It's something you build little by little." Her words struck me like a lightning bolt. I realized I was being impatient, expecting results right away. I had been so focused on where I wanted to be that I completely overlooked the importance of the journey itself. In that moment, I decided to switch things up. Instead of waiting for things around me to change in a snap, I began to shift how I viewed the world. I started to look for small bits of joy and gratitude in everyday life. I began to savor my breakfast, feel the sun on my face during my walk to work, and really enjoy conversations with my coworkers. Slowly but surely, I figured out that the change I was seeking wasn't just out there in the world, but mainly within myself. It was an intense learning experience with emotional highs and lows, but every frustration and every moment of doubt reminded me that real change takes time. Maybe the real miracle wasn't about having a perfect life right away, but instead finding beauty and meaning in the life I already had. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I started to grasp what the being of light meant about clearing mental blocks. It wasn't just about swapping out negative thoughts. It was a deep-rooted process of breaking down beliefs I had held onto for years, maybe even decades. One day at work, while grappling with a particularly tricky task, when I was tackling a tough project, I felt that familiar pressure building up in my chest again. That's when it hit me. This reaction to stress, this fear of failing, wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern that had been part of me for a long time. I started to think about where this fear came from and why I felt so pushed to succeed. I dug deep into my memories and emotions and stumbled upon something I had completely forgotten. As a kid, my dad often told me that nothing worth having comes easy. Back then, it sounded like wise advice, but now I could see how that belief had become a heavy burden for me. The idea that life was all about hard work made it tough for me to notice the chances for joy and ease that were right in front of me. I was stuck in a cycle of struggle, even when it wasn't necessary. I realized I had a bunch of other beliefs holding me back too, like money doesn't grow on trees and you have to suffer to earn the good stuff, or that life is just one continuous fight. These thoughts played like silent mantras in my head, tinting every experience I had. So, I decided to actively identify and question these beliefs. Every time I caught myself thinking something like, "This is too hard," or "I'll never make it," I would pause and ask myself, is this really true, or is it just an old way of thinking? It was tricky at times, almost like I was battling myself, but little by little, I started swapping out those limiting beliefs for more positive, empowering ones. Instead of telling myself that everything in life is hard, I began to say, sometimes things just flow easily. And instead of thinking that money doesn't grow on trees, I shifted my mindset to recognize the endless opportunities for abundance all around me. It didn't change overnight. There were days when those old thoughts came rushing back. But each day, it got a little easier to spot those patterns and make a conscious choice to think differently. One practice that really helped me was meditation. I began sitting down to meditate each morning, even if it was just for 10 minutes. In those quiet moments, I learned to observe my thoughts without judging them, like clouds drifting across the sky in my mind. This practice gave me a fresh perspective on my thoughts and feelings. I understood that I didn't have to attach myself to every thought that popped up. I could choose where to focus my energy. Writing in a diary also played a big role in my journey. Every day, I would jot down my thoughts and reflections. The night before bed, I started jotting down my thoughts about the day. I made note of the times I caught myself slipping back into old habits and how sometimes I was able to switch up my way of thinking. This little exercise helped me see how far I'd come over time. Slowly, I began to notice some changes in my life. Situations that used to stress me out to no end started feeling more manageable. I began finding creative ways to tackle problems that once felt impossible. Most importantly, I started to feel lighter and at peace with myself. That constant weight I carried, that feeling like I had to be in a fight all the time, started to fade. It wasn't an easy road, though. There were plenty of moments when I doubted myself, times when I felt like giving up and slipping back into those old habits. But each little win, every single time I managed to shift my thinking and see things differently, gave me the push to keep moving forward. I came to realize that breaking down these mental barriers was going to be a lifelong journey. It wasn't something I could just fix once and move on from. It was a continuous process of looking inward, making conscious choices, and growing. Little by little, I started to grasp that maybe the real gift from my near-death experience wasn't a promise of a perfect life, but rather the chance to look at the life I already had with fresh eyes, free from the limits I had set for myself. As I worked on clearing my mental blocks and changing my perspective, I noticed tangible changes in my life. At first, they were tiny, almost unnoticeable, but over time, those little changes began to build up and make a real difference. One of the first things I spotted was how my work environment improved. I used to see my job as a never-ending source of stress and frustration. But as I started to shift my attitude, I saw my relationships with coworkers and bosses start to change too. I remember one particular day. We were knee-deep in a complicated project with tight deadlines and a ton of pressure. Normally, that type of situation would send me spiraling into anxiety and anger. But that day, instead of letting it stress me out, I chose to tackle the challenge with a positive mindset. I gathered my team together and said, "Hey, I know we're feeling the pressure, but I really believe we can get through this together. Let's brainstorm some creative solutions." To my surprise, this simple change in attitude sparked something in the team. Everyone became more engaged, and the atmosphere shifted. Ideas started to flow, and we not only met the deadline but delivered some amazing work. My boss was so impressed that he called me in for a talk. "Gavin," he said, "I've noticed something different about you in the last few months. You're leading the team like I've never seen before." That conversation ended up leading to a promotion I didn't even know was up for grabs. Things at home changed too. Elena and I had always gotten along well, but it felt like we were closer than ever. I began practicing gratitude, taking a moment each day to express how much I appreciated her, which created a positive cycle of love and appreciation. One evening, we were relaxing on the couch after dinner, and Elena turned to me and said, "You know, Gavin, our life feels lighter lately. It's like we found a new rhythm together." Hearing that made me really happy, as I realized that the shifts I was making were impacting not just me, but also those around me. Things improved financially too. With my promotion, our money situation became a lot easier. But even more than that, my new attitude toward money started bringing in some unexpected opportunities. One day, an old friend approached me with a business idea. Normally, I would be hesitant and careful, but something pushed me to take a chance. We decided to invest in a small venture together, and to my surprise, the business took off, giving me an extra income stream I never thought I'd have. But I think the biggest change happened with my health. Remember that tightness in my chest that the doctor said was just stress? Well, it's practically disappeared. Not all at once, but gradually, as I learned to cope with stress better, relax more, and shift my perspective to a more positive one, that tight feeling began to fade away. I also started taking better care of my body, exercising regularly, not because I had to, but because I genuinely enjoyed the movement and felt more connected to myself. I revamped my diet, choosing healthier, more nutritious foods. Not as a strict regimen, but as a mindful choice to take better care of myself. One of the most surprising things I noticed was that my intuition seemed sharper. It was like I could sense when something felt right or wrong for me. I started trusting that inner voice more, and it led me to make choices that might have seemed a bit weird or risky, but ended up being really good for me. For instance, there was this time at work when I got asked to join a project that looked awesome on paper, but something inside me was saying it wasn't the best idea. So, against all odds, I decided to pass on it. A few weeks later, that project hit some serious bumps in the road, and I felt so relieved for going with my gut. Another big change was how I connected with nature. I started to feel a stronger bond with the great outdoors. I began taking regular strolls in a park near my place, and those walks turned into almost meditative experiences for me. Watching the trees sway in the wind, listening to the birds chirping, and feeling the grass under my feet all became little moments of peace and renewal. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, of course. There were tough moments, times of doubt, fear, and a pull towards old habits. There were days when things didn't go as I planned, and I slipped back into negative thinking. I remember a particularly challenging time when my dad got sick. It was a really stressful and worrying period, and for a bit, I felt like I was losing all the progress I had made. But it was right then that I noticed how much I had actually changed. Instead of letting fear and anxiety take over, I found myself able to keep a more balanced mindset. Sure, I was worried and sad, but I also found moments of peace and gratitude for being there with my dad during such a tough time. I managed to be a source of strength for my family, something I'm not sure I could have done before. As these changes piled up, I started to see that I was living a whole lot differently than I used to. It wasn't a flawless life, but it had more awareness, balance, and joy. People around me began to notice the shift too. Friends mentioned how I seemed more relaxed and happier, while coworkers sought me out for advice on handling stress. Even strangers acted differently around me, as if they could feel some positive vibes coming from me. That's when I really grasped what the being of light had taught me about manifestation. It wasn't about magic or getting everything I wanted right away. It was about changing my outlook and approach to life. As I got my thoughts and actions in sync with what I truly wanted and learned to trust the journey of life, I came to realize that genuine manifestation wasn't really about trying to control everything around me. Instead, it was about nurturing a peaceful, grateful, and open mindset. As I did this, it felt like the world around me started responding in a positive way. I wasn't building a whole new reality from scratch. I was simply learning to notice and appreciate the beauty in the reality that was already there. I was working in harmony with what existed to bring more of what I desired into my life. It was all about discovering and learning continuously, and even though it could be tough at times, it was so rewarding. Each little win, every moment of clarity, and every challenge I overcame made me feel more alive and more like myself. So, day by day, week by week, month by month, I crafted a new life. One that, while not perfect, was so much richer and meaningful, aligning more with who I really was. As I started to see more changes in my life, I felt a growing urge to share my experience with others. I wasn't looking to be a teacher or a guru, not at all, but I genuinely believed that what I had learned could help others just like it had helped me. At first, I only opened up to close friends and family. I remember one night when some friends came over for dinner. After we ate and were enjoying coffee, the chat naturally drifted to the changes they had noticed in me. Gavin spoke up, saying, "You seem really at peace lately. What's up with you?" I paused for a moment because up until then, I had only shared my experience with Elena. But seeing the curious and concerned looks on my friends' faces made me realize it was time to open up. I started to talk about my near-death experience, sharing about the golden light, the being of light, and the truths I had discovered. As I spoke, I closely watched my friends' reactions. To my surprise, I didn't see any judgment or disbelief in their expressions. Instead, I saw curiosity, interest, and even recognition in some cases. When I wrapped up, there was a brief moment of silence, and then, unexpectedly, Sarah, Mike's wife, began to cry. "Gavin," she said between sobs, You have no idea how much I needed to hear that today." Sarah went on to explain that she was going through a tough time, feeling lost and without purpose. My story, she said, had given her hope that things could improve and that there was so much more to life than what she saw on the surface. That night changed everything for me. I realized that sharing my story wasn't just about relaying something cool. It was about giving hope, inspiration, and a fresh outlook to others. From that point on, I made a conscious effort to be more open about my experiences. I didn't tell everyone I met, but whenever the chance came up and I felt someone might find it helpful, I shared it. At work, during a company retreat, I got a chance to lead a session on managing stress. Instead of just going over the usual techniques everyone already knew, I decided to open up about my own journey a bit. I talked about how I had learned to flip my view on stress, seeing challenges as chances to grow instead of roadblocks. I also shared some visualization and gratitude practices I had picked up along the way. The reaction was surprising. Lots of my colleagues came up to me afterward wanting to know more. Some even asked me to casually mentor them, helping them tackle stress and find more balance in their lives. One colleague, Elena, reached out a few months after the retreat. She told me that what I had shared helped her not only manage stress at work, but also improve her relationships with her husband and kids. Knowing my experience was positively impacting others was such a rewarding feeling. I also started going to support groups for folks who'd had near-death experiences. At first, I just listened, hoping to understand my own experience better by hearing others' stories. But before long, I found myself sharing too, providing comfort and understanding to those like me who were trying to make sense of something that shook their beliefs about reality. At one meeting, I met an older woman named Eleanor. She had her near-death experience decades ago, but never felt it was safe to talk about it. "Everyone would think I was crazy," she said. Hearing my story and those of others in the group helped validate something she had kept close to her heart for so long. Of course, there were tough moments too. Not everyone was open to what I wanted to share. Some were skeptical, and others clearly uncomfortable. I learned to respect those reactions and understand that not everyone is ready to embrace ideas that challenge their views. But for every person who reacted with skepticism, there were others who found comfort in what I had to say. At first, I wasn't sure how people would react to my story. But surprisingly, a lot of folks found comfort and meaning in what I had to say, and that really inspired me to keep sharing. Before long, I started getting invited to speak at local events, nothing huge, just community groups and spiritual gatherings. I shared my experiences, sure, but more importantly, I talked about the lessons I'd picked up along the way and how others could use them in their lives. I always made it clear that I didn't have all the answers and was still figuring things out myself. I wanted to share what I'd learned in the hopes it could help others find a little more peace, purpose, and joy in their own lives. As I opened up, I realized that I wasn't just helping others. I was helping myself too. Each time I spoke and saw that spark of understanding in someone's eyes, it felt like I was reinforcing the lessons I had learned, making them even more meaningful for me. Sharing my story became a crucial part of my own healing journey. It stopped being just about me. It became about being a part of something bigger, contributing to the healing and growth of the community. Little by little, I found new purpose in my life. I hadn't planned for it, but it naturally grew out of my desire to help others. It was a path that filled my life with satisfaction and meaning. As the years went by since my near-death experience, I've had plenty of time to think about everything that happened and how it changed me. Looking back, I see a journey filled with ups and downs, discoveries, challenges, and constant growth. What amazes me the most is how my experience still plays a role in my life, even years later. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It kicked off an ongoing transformation that's still happening today. Sometimes I find myself wondering what life would be like if that experience hadn't happened. What if I hadn't gone through that near-death ordeal? It's tough to picture who I was back then. It feels almost like it was a different lifetime. I haven't turned into some kind of perfect person, far from it. I still have doubts, fears, and bad days. I still make mistakes. But the big difference now is that I've got tools to handle those tough situations in a healthier, more constructive way. That's one of the biggest lessons I've learned on this journey. I used to see reality in a very straightforward and limited way, but now I realize there's way more to life than what we can see or touch. There's this deeper spiritual energy that's all around us. It completely shifted how I think about life and death. I'm not scared of dying like I used to be. Not that I'm eager to go, because I love living and want to soak it all in. I get now that death isn't really the end. It's just a change into another kind of existence. Another big lesson for me was about how powerful our thoughts and beliefs are. I realized that we actually create our own reality, not in some magical way, but in a real, everyday sense, where our perceptions and beliefs shape how we experience life. I've become much more aware of my thought patterns. When I find myself slipping into negative or limiting thoughts, I'm learning to recognize them and consciously change my mindset. It's not always easy, but it really improves my quality of life. Gratitude has turned into a daily practice for me. It's not just about being thankful for the big stuff, it's about appreciating the little joys in life too. The taste of my morning coffee, a stranger's smile on the street, the warmth of the sun on my face. This practice of gratitude has completely changed how I experience life. I've also come to understand how important it is to connect with myself, with other people, with nature, and with something bigger than myself. I see now that we're all tied together in a deep and mysterious way. This realization has made me way more compassionate and understanding toward others, even those who seem really different from me. One of the most surprising things I found on this journey is that the more open I am to this new way of looking at the world, the more meaningful coincidences pop up in my life. Unexpected meetings that lead to amazing opportunities, random events that just seem to fall into place, insights that come right when I need them. It's like by aligning myself with this bigger view of reality, I'm becoming more in sync with the flow of life. Another thing I've reflected on is the idea of purpose. Before this experience, I thought of life's purpose in very narrow terms, usually linked to material success or career achievements. Now I see that true purpose is much deeper and more personal. For me, it's become about growing, learning, loving, and finding ways to contribute the greater good. This doesn't mean I've given up on my dreams or stopped working hard for success. In fact, I think I'm doing better now than I was before. The difference is that success isn't the goal anymore. It's just what happens when I live in line with my values and what really matters to me. One of the biggest realizations I've had on this journey has been about love. The love I felt during my near-death experience was so immense and unconditional that it totally shifted my view on what love can be. Since then, I've been working on bringing some of that love into my daily life, into my relationships, and in how I connect with everyone around me. It's definitely not easy, since our egos and their fears often get in the way. But every time I tap into that deeper love, whether through a moment of connection with Elena or a sense of compassion for someone I don't know, I feel like I'm getting closer to living out the truth I discovered in that incredible experience. Another thing that really surprised me during this time was realizing how many other people have gone through similar things. As I've shared my story, I've heard countless other accounts from individuals who've had near-death experiences or other powerful spiritual moments. It made me see that these experiences are way more common than we think, but we just don't talk about them much in our society. This makes me think about how our modern Western culture often overlooks or brushes off the spiritual side of life. We live in a world that prizes what's physical, measurable, and scientific. While I absolutely believe in the value of science, I also think there's a lot more to reality than what our tools can currently show us. My experience has opened my mind to consider possibilities that go beyond what we see as normal or even possible. It's not about believing in everything blindly. It's about staying curious and being open to exploring the unknown. One of the key reflections I've had on this journey has been about the nature of consciousness. My near-death experience made me really question what consciousness actually is, and whether it's just something that comes from our brains. The feeling of expanding beyond my body made me wonder if maybe consciousness is something way bigger and more mysterious than we usually think. I started looking into different spiritual and philosophical beliefs to see how other cultures and times deal with life's big questions. It's pretty amazing how much overlap there is between how different traditions describe transcendent experiences and what I've gone through myself. Another key insight for me has been about the role of suffering in our lives. Before my near-death experience, I viewed suffering as nothing but negative, a thing to steer clear of at all costs. But now, while I don't go looking for pain, I've come to realize it can often push us to grow and change for the better. My journey kicked off with a terrifying and painful event, my near-death experience. Ironically, it was that event that opened my eyes to a deeper understanding of life. It made me rethink how I tackle challenges and hardships that pop up in my life. One of the most shocking things I've found out on this path is the impact of intention. I've learned that when we set a clear intention and stick to it with focus, things start falling into place in ways we wouldn't expect. It's not some kind of magic. It's more about tuning into the opportunities that are already around us. That doesn't mean everything goes exactly as we want. Life is still unpredictable and full of surprises. But I'm learning to trust the journey more and have faith that even when things don't turn out as planned, there's always a lesson, always a chance to grow. Looking back, I can see how much has changed since that Christmas Eve in 2015, not just in my surroundings, but mostly in how I experience the world. It feels like I've woken up to a richer, deeper, and more meaningful reality. At the same time, I know my journey isn't finished. Each day brings new lessons, new challenges, and new chances to grow, and that's what makes life so thrilling and full of potential. As I look forward, I feel a mix of excitement and curiosity. I don't know what's next, but I'm sure I'll keep learning, growing, and diving into the depths of existence. I also hope to keep sharing this journey with others, bringing a little light and hope to those who, like me, are looking for deeper meaning in their lives.